Bonjour everyone, I am Annelise Caillez and welcome to Parlez-Vous CEO, where we ditch the corporate talk and get real about entrepreneurship. Each week, I chat with founders and CEOs who build businesses their way, through the failures, pivots, and breakthroughs. And they bring the fire. Plus, I'll drop some golden nuggets of wisdom from my own entrepreneurial journey. This is your space to grow, learn, and evolve with a true growth mindset. Remember, success isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. Now let's kick things off and get this party started. Hello, bonjour, and bonjour, hello. Welcome to another episode of Parlez-Vous CEO. My name is Annelise Caillez, and I am your host. And today I am super excited to be meeting with Sarah Darren, based in Connecticut, and who's the CEO from Experience Camps. Sarah, super nice to meet you. Super excited to dive into your story and your background. In your own words, could you share a little bit about our audience, about who you are and why you started Experience Camps?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here and sharing our story with you. So I had a very untraditional, I would say, journey from what you might think, where somebody might end up running a children's grief organization. My background was in computer science when I was young in college, and I went into the business world to design systems. And what I found was a journey that took me down a very different path. I went to business school. I met what would become my husband, who was a camp director. He ran and owns a summer camp in Maine. And one thing led to another, and I found myself kind of thrown into the world of summer camp, from the world of technology and corporate and all the places that I was in my career. And those things really merged together in a pretty beautiful way, along with some pivots along the way. So in 2008, during the midst of the financial crisis, I lost my job in financial services technology. And all of a sudden, my summer camp became my soft landing. So through that experience, we decided to start a nonprofit. I was looking for something that would maybe provide some more meaning in the world. We had this incredible platform of summer camp at our disposal through his work, through his camp. And we really sought to find a mission, a place where kids could go to camp that otherwise wouldn't get to go. And through that and through some exploration, Experience Camps was born. So that started in 2009. We had, at the time, 27 children, all of whom were grieving the death of a parent. And it has really just been a pretty wild and fast journey ever since then. From that first day we opened our gates until now, 17 years later, we have grown, we have expanded, and we have transformed lives of grieving children.
Wow, that's so amazing and inspiring. What a great story. And so, Sarah, you really left finance to start camps for grieving children. And what was the moment you realized that this was your calling?
Honestly, it probably wasn't until the kids arrived. I think when we first heard about the idea of grief camp, and I should also start by saying I wasn't a grieving person when we started Experience Camps. I think most people who start grief organizations have some sort of experience with grief that propels them into that space. For me, I care a lot about children, and the grief part of it was something that came to us. There was a camp in Maine right near ours that was doing a girls' camp for grieving children, and they needed a brother camp. My husband's camp is a boys' camp, so we agreed to do the boys' side. But it was really, I mean, the stars aligned. It wasn't like we were looking for grief camp. We weren't thinking that was our mission. It sort of was presented to us, and we thought that sounds really important and really meaningful. And it wasn't something I or any of us that were starting at the time had really thought about. It wasn't like we knew that there was a need for this. It came to us. So, I think when those 27 kids first arrived, I didn't know entirely what to expect and how I would feel. It seemed like a good idea. It seemed like something that could be really powerful, but there's nothing quite like, seeing those little sweet faces arrive on camp. And then as the week very quickly unfolded, you hear their stories, you see these moments of great raw pain and then immense beautiful joy and laughter and play. And it was through each of those moments throughout that week that like those seeds were planted in me that was so impactful. And I can remember actually that first week very clearly that the end of the week we did a final campfire. We do this at every one of our programs, cross experience camps now. But the final event is this final campfire where a whole camp comes together in a very quiet, sacred place around a fire, and each child and each adult is invited to stand up in front of the camp, share their story, share the name of the person who died, and light a candle. And imagine, right? You have 27 kids, we had 30 volunteers. Many of them were saying these words or hearing these words from other grieving people for the first time in their lives. And for me, that was the moment. There was something that really sparked in that event, in that moment, that was so it was so strong. Like you could feel the power of our community in that moment together, but also just to see and hear the way the kids reflected, even on the short week we'd already had together, and saying things like, I'd never known anybody like me before, and now these are my brothers. Um, there were so many moments like that in that fire, but also throughout the week that really gelled the path forward for us, for me.
Wow, what amazing and how inspiring. So, Sarah, 1 in 12 kids loses a parent or a sibling, yet childhood grief is often overlooked. How do you bring visibility to something people avoid thinking about?
It's a really good question. I mean, grief is universal. Everybody's going to experience at some point. For children, it can be really isolating because it's not supposed to happen for them, right? That's what we call sort of, out of the natural order. When a child loses a parent, it means they died young. They died unexpectedly. They died for reasons that were not the natural old age. Whether it was a parent, a sibling, even a grandparent, that can really impact a child's life and future profoundly. And grief is something that is part of our culture and society in a way that could be done a lot better, generally, even for adults. So we are on a mission not only to support grieving children through summer camp programs, year-round programs, tools, resources, etc. We're also looking to change the way that society addresses grief and supports all grievers in their grief, children and adults, so that we can maybe make a little bit of a better way to experience grief, the thing that everyone will at some point experience. Why does it need to be so taboo? Why does it need to be so hard? Um, I mean, grief will be hard, right? That is a given, but it doesn't have to be as hard as our society necessarily makes it. So what we're trying to do is bring awareness to what children need, what adults need in their grief, giving people permission to talk about it. I think that's the most basic and most foundational part that people can do better, is not leaning away from it, but leaning in. So we do a lot through social media. We do a lot through education platforms to really bring more awareness to what you can say and do, how you can talk about grief, how you can break down the walls of isolation between the grievers and the non-grievers, so that people know where they can go to feel safe in expressing their feelings, having their feelings, and just going through the lifelong journey of grief at each stage. One of the things that's really, I think, commonly misunderstood about grief is that there is no timeline, right? So a lot of people will show up in the early days, the ritual moments of grief, when there's funerals and wakes and shivas and the things that you do in the aftermath of a death. But what then people forget to do is keep checking in, right? Just because most people have moved on doesn't mean that the primary grievers have. So what happens is you have all these festivities, these events, these funerals, all the things that bring people together in this really beautiful way to celebrate a life, to celebrate love, and then they all leave. And that child, the adults, the people who were there left to pick up the pieces are in some ways more alone than ever. So one of the most basic things we tell people is just check in. No, put a note on your calendar. Remember a month in, remember the anniversaries, go back and see how those people are doing. See if they want to talk about it, see if they want to remember, share a name of their person and tell a story. But just keeping their life relevant in the conversation for those people can mean so much and make such a big difference in the way that we allow grief to unfold in our lives.
Absolutely. I think this is a great reminder for anyone who is listening and knowing somebody going through a grieving process. So not only be there as it happens, but make sure to check in as it's almost as equally important.
Sorry, I'm just closing my Slack, which is dinging on the computer. Were you hearing that?
Yeah, that's okay. So, Sarah, you've grown from 27 campers to nearly 1,000 nationwide. What do you feel has been the most unexpected challenge in scaling?
Hmm. So we've actually grown from 27 campers to over 1,500 this summer. Um, and I would say the most unexpected challenge, maybe it's not unexpected, but the challenge we have in scaling, a couple things. One is I would always say making sure the right people are in the right seats. And as people, as the organization grows, and we've grown very quickly, the seats change, the needs change of the the skills, the competencies, the things that we need in order to grow. And adapting to that change has probably been one of the biggest learnings, one of the hardest parts of growing because you get locked in on your people and the things that you do and the ways that you do things. But then every day, every month, every year, it's changing a little bit because you're doing it differently. Running one camp is very different than running what we now have, which is 14 different programs nationwide. So the way we operate has to change, which means the way the people need to operate in that model needs to change, right? So it's keeping pace with the growth of the organization versus the people in the organization is one of the hardest parts of scaling, I think. And the other is, the systems and processes and the the maturity of those processes that needs to keep up, right? Especially when you're growing very quickly. There's that early those early days are such a hustle, right? You're just like you're getting it done and you're doing your spreadsheets and you're jamming things out and you're just doing. And then at some point it shifts into you're doing, but you need to really do it with a very clear roadmap. And then you need to do it with really clear systems and structure. And that's an evolution, right? That takes some change management and different ways of thinking. So I think those are the two things, the evolution of the people, the evolution of the processes, and the way that those two things work together as we grow.
And from what I understand, you have some kids on wait list and you rely on donations. So how do you balance serving more children with the reality of fundraising?
Mm. Yeah, I mean that's the hard part, right? We never want to tell a child they can't come to camp if they want to come to camp, but we are limited. We had this summer, as I mentioned, 1,500 kids, but in the United States alone, 6.5 million children will grieve the death of a parent by the time they turn 18. Right? That's a pretty huge multiple of kids that will never be able to come to camp because we will never have that many beds. There aren't that many camp beds in America and maybe across the world. So we are always looking for ways to one grow camp because that's our bread and butter. That's our sweet spot and something we find is so incredibly powerful. But we're also looking to develop programs, products, and tools that allow us to go much broader on scale, maybe not as deep, but for instance, we have a really incredible social media presence on TikTok and Instagram where we are taking the stories of our kids and projecting them out into the world and building community, even within the comments. You see our kids talk about their grief on social media, and there's so much in the comments of like, Me too. Oh my gosh, that happened to me too. I see you, support you. So there's ways to have light touches of grief that can be much more far reaching and reach many, many more kids than what we'll ever be able to do at camp. But at the same time, we want to do both, right? So that the camp piece of it, the in-person programs, anywhere that we are directly supporting children, it's going to be more expensive because there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more logistics and safety and risk and all of those things that we need to address. So fundraising is where that comes in, right? All of our programs are free to every child who attends. So in order to do that, we raise money all year round. We do a lot of work in telling our stories, not just the individual stories that kids are willing to share, but the stories of the impact of how this matters, how this makes a difference in a child's life, one child's life, and thousands of children's lives. And I think that's a really important balance that we always have to strike in philanthropy is bringing home the heart of a story because people really relate to a child, but also being able to explain the scale, the scope, the broader impact of it's not just about one, it's about all those 6 million, or it's not just about one, it's about the 1,500 we serve this year. And identifying to the donor or to the people we're talking to, what do they care about? And which part of that is really important to them? Is it that one, sweet face they want to make sure goes to camp every year? Or are there donors, foundations, corporate, et cetera, that really understand the far-reaching impact, the long-term impact of if we don't help these kids, there's some really negative outcomes that will come down the line, and we need to get ahead of that.
And I am a marketer, so I am curious as to marketing grief services because I am sure it requires a lot of incredible sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
So, what have you found has been a challenge in working on campaigns, and how have you overcome these challenges?
It's something we talk about a lot, right? We never want to use our kids in a way that doesn't feel good for them, for us. Obviously, we don't want to um, exploit them. We don't want to exploit their grief stories in any way. And what we have found is our kids can't wait to tell their stories. When they are given the opportunity, they see it as such a privilege to be able to help someone else through their story. And if they don't, they don't, right? There's some kids that are like, I'm shy. I don't want to tell my story on camera. No, thank you. And then they don't. We're never going to press them to do that. But we are very thoughtful about how we ask questions, how we give them permission to share their story, making sure their parent and caregiver is comfortable with that. We'll go back to them even after they've recorded a video or told us their story. We'll go back to the child and the caregiver afterwards if we're going to use it, just to say like, hey, I know you were caught up in the moment at camp and we're very excited to talk about your dad. Are you okay if we put this on social media? Because, you might change your mind when you get home and you think about your friends at home seeing that, et cetera. So that's been one of the challenges. There's been a couple times where kids like, yeah, no, tell my story. And then they get home and they're like, oh, and my friend at home who doesn't get it kind of like made fun of me for that and take it down. Right. So that's an easy
Mhm.
thing to fix. But we do have a lot of conversations to make sure that the child really understands and is really wanting to use their words and their story to help the organization, but more importantly, to help other kids like them.
Mhm. Wow, that's really interesting. It must be really interesting to do this type of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Sarah, if you had a magic wand to take your organization to the next level in 1 year, what would it look like?
Oh, the next level. We're going there. I feel like I might have that magic wand. It's really, we're on a rocket ship right now. It is getting us to a place where we can comfortably scale camp quickly and efficiently. So that's number one. That's of our pillars. Like camp again is one of our main things. I would love to be able to open multiple camps a year, every year going forward, until we reach the end of camp capacity across the world. So that would be one magic wand moment, just ensuring that we have the systems, the logistics set up. And again, as I said before, the people, because for us, we can't do anything without amazing people. And while we have many, many amazing people, they're not like that easy to find in terms of like all the things we need for a camp program to operate. So putting the training in place and ensuring that we are building a pipeline and just always making sure we have the next amazing person lined up to open the next camp is really is really important to how we're going to be able to operate. But then I think there's the everything else, right? As I mentioned, not every child's going to come to camp. They'll never be able to. So how do we really explode this other side of the house in terms of our marketing and our thought leadership and our education platforms? That's where I see us really going into a much bigger scale in the future and building something where we are the go-to in childhood grief. We are, as one of my colleagues puts it, the AA of grief, right? We want to be the household name where, if something happens to anybody the first thing you think is, I'm going to call experience camps. They'll know what to do. And that you'll have the tools, you'll have the roadmap, you'll know where to go from there. I get just in my personal life, probably 1 to 2 calls a week of just like, hey, I know somebody, what should we do? Somebody's dying, somebody died. Where do I go? What do I tell them? Who do I call? And I know those resources are out there. I know where to find them, but no one else seems to know, right? We need to solve that problem. We need to solve that through the places that children are in their schools, the places that work with children, anybody who's in youth development, the caregivers, and then just general information. It shouldn't be so hard to find what is needed at these really devastating critical moments in life that will be happening to many, many people. So my goal is to make sure that these tools, these resources, these programs are accessible to everybody easily and easy to find.
And so, is that why you've expanded beyond campus into digital platforms like Grief Sucks? And
Yes.
also, so how do you decide when to innovate versus how to focus on your core mission?
Great question. So I'm glad you brought up Grief Sucks. That deserves a shout out. So Grief Sucks is a digital platform we built for teens by teens. So this was an idea as one of our innovation platforms where we realized that teens are a special little unit of their own in childhood, right? They're not kids, they're not adults, they're somewhere in between, and they need and want special things. They want their own little clubhouse. So Grief Sucks is basically the teen grief clubhouse that we built with our youth advisory board. We have a youth advisory board of teenagers that are grieving who informed every part of this platform. It is a website, it's a TikTok, Instagram, and it is a collection basically of videos of kids talking about their grief and then different themes around grief. There's book clubs, there's movie bits, there's all these different things that come together to normalize grief for teens in their own language, in their bright, happy colors, in their way that they take in information and put out information. So that's been an incredible place for a very unique group of kids to come and like belong. And that's a really important part of grief for us in that community that we're building is that there is a place where each person can belong. Grief Sucks did that. So that was a place that we innovated. How do we decide when to innovate? We're always innovating. We're always looking for ways to do something new, something different, and stay ahead of where grief is going, which sounds silly, right? Because grief is grief. It's a normal reaction to loss. It's been around forever and it will be around forever. But the way that individuals experience grief now in the digital age, in how many death announcements have you seen on Facebook, right? How do you see people express themselves on social media or in different venues? Text messages have been very common, condolence calls now instead of phone calls. So like, the world is changing in how we check in on grief and how we experience grief. We want to ensure that we're providing, like I said, that tools and accessibility that follows those needs, right? There's going to be something with AI. I'm sure already is in certain places with grief. We have to be really careful with that. because there's a lot of ethical and safety concerns around it. And we're going to be very thoughtful, but we're thinking about it. And that's going to be a place that we think about how to innovate, how we present, and how we capture information for people. Again, that journey, that roadmap, that accessibility of information for people to find, where can we play a role in that? So in everything we do, we're always looking at how we're going to innovate, whether it's doing something different at camp, doing something different with a new digital platform, developing new products, or even just how we distribute resources, right? Like nobody wants a pamphlet anymore. I'm not going to hand out a pamphlet. So how are we, experience camps, we're uniquely situated to deliver digital content, going to package new ways of providing education to all those people we talked about, the educators, the caregivers, the youth development professionals. So we're always thinking about that.
And so you touched on it a little bit before, and I'm thinking about your team as you're thinking, as we're talking about how you're also shifting to the digital workspace. You are managing a team of volunteers, right? And grieving children is unique. So, what do you feel has been the most important leadership lesson you've learned?
So many. I would say, I mean, with the volunteers and our staff, we do have a full-time staff as well. I think what has served me in leadership most is trusting people to activate their own superpowers. At every moment of the growth of this organization, there's been an inflection point that I could tie back to a person or a group of people who came in with something unique and special and amazing and made it better. And my leadership lesson in that was to let them do that and to trust that they could do that and to make some space for trying new things. Maybe it wasn't going to be perfect and we're going to iterate on it. But when I have seen amazing people with pure hearts and great purpose and passion step forward, it almost always goes really well. So allowing them into that space, there's a lot of people here that feel really strongly that they helped start experience camps. They've helped build experience camps. And that is true. Many, many people, thousands have. They've made incredible contributions and marks on this organization. But I think it was in part because we allowed them the space to do that and the permission to try something, to do something big. And it paid off in big ways.
Wow, that's amazing and so inspiring. And for entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs who are thinking or are already tackling uncomfortable social problems, what's your advice for breaking through the initial resistance?
It's really just the leaning into it. I find that people, once you break through that very thin wall of discomfort, I find people want to go there, especially people who have experienced whatever that thing is that is making them uncomfortable, right? Anybody who's experienced grief, all you have to do is like, wink at them and they're like, mine too, my dad died too. Like people want to blurt out the words when they find the people who get them, when they find the people who can connect in what they're going through. There is no wall. But the only way you're going to find that that connection is there is if someone initiates that connection. So I would say for any uncomfortable topic in mental health, break through the wall because there's a whole, sea of people on the other side of it that are looking for that connection and don't know how to get to it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Sarah, if you were meeting your 20-year-old self today and you had some piece of wisdom, I call them the golden nuggets that you wanted to share with her, with life and business, what would they be?
I'd say trust the journey, trust the process. When I got laid off from my job back in 2008, I was spun. This was a moment I was a very structured, I had a plan, and it did not involve running a summer camp program or a summer camp organization. And looking back, obviously it was the best thing that ever happened in my whole life, other than I guess meeting the guy that made that all happen also. But I tell people all the time that are kind of like entering college or going through college, like your first job is not going to be your last job. You don't know what decision you make now, how it's going to lead to the next thing. But if I can start as a computer programmer and end up running a children's grief organization and have it be, the best career I possibly could have ever expected and wanted, I just think you can't know what's going to happen, and you have to leave space for just following the steps in front of you and taking the next turn when it comes. But don't get too hung up on what you think should happen. Just follow the journey.
Beautiful. And Sarah, where can people find us, and what are the next? Where do you see experience camps in 1 year from now?
Well, I can answer that question. Well, we're all in our planning phase right now. So you can find us on experiencecamps.org is our website. And physically, you can find us in what will next year be 8 different states where our camps will take place. If I try to name them right now, I'm probably going to forget some, but we're opening in Texas next year as our 8th location. We have Michigan, Maine, California, Georgia, Connecticut, Maryland, Pennsylvania. I forget which one I'm missing, but we have 8 different states. And next year, again, besides opening Texas, we're opening more family camp programs. That was something we've been piloting over the last year, where caregivers and their kids can come to camp. We are reaching new kids in new communities through our meetups, where we do kind of day workshops with kids. We go to baseball games. We are building communities for grieving kids wherever we can possibly go. And you're going to keep seeing more of that. You're going to keep seeing more of us in the digital spaces, talking about grief, normalizing grief for society, and ultimately educating the world on how to be better grief-informed allies to the grievers, so we can make a better world for grieving people everywhere, and ultimately just a better world.
Amazing, Sarah. Beautiful mission, and so inspiring. Your story is hopefully inspiring other people to also find their big why, find a mission that they align to, and work on something meaningful. And sometimes your career path is not going to look as you had anticipated, right? And sometimes that it just opportunity lands to do good to the world, and how to seize it and make the most of it. I loved it. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed being here.
Thank you again for being part of Parlez-Vous CEO and sharing your story. And that wraps up today's episode. I am Annelise Caillez, and I can't wait to join you again next week.
Thanks for listening to Parlez-Vous CEO today. If you enjoyed the show, leave a 5-star review. It helps us keep going. And connect with us on Instagram at Parlez-Vous CEO. I am Annelise Caillez, and I know some days are harder than others. On those tough days, think back to why you started. What you're doing today matters, even when you can't see the results yet. Ideas are great, but it's what you do with them that counts. Find everything we talked about today at parlezvousceo.com. See you next week, and you've got this.